Welcome back to another episode of What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. Want to know what it's really like to be an entrepreneur? Well, you came to the right place. Whether you're already an entrepreneur or looking to start your journey tomorrow, or just someone who needs a little extra motivation to get through the day, this is the perfect podcast for you. This is the place where you will learn exactly what it's like in the world of entrepreneurship and hear authentic stories of entrepreneurs grinding on each episode. My goal for this podcast is to help you realize that giving up is never an option. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. Before I introduce my guest, I'll share another entrepreneurial story to inspire you all. Since I have an athlete on the show, I will showcase the entrepreneurial endeavors of another athlete who you all may have heard of in LeBron James. Here's a few highlights I jotted down. We all know LeBron James is one of the greatest talents in NBA history, but there's a lot more to pro basketball to this former number one overall pick. This article from Forbes describes LeBron James as having the NBA's top endorsement portfolio in Spring Hill Entertainment and also the top media company in Uninterrupted. He's even collaborated with the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cindy Crawford, and Lindsey Vonn. During the year 2018, they all helped launch a health and wellness company in Ladder. The LeBron James Family Foundation even opened up its first elementary school that same year. This organization plans to spend $41 million to send kids to study at the college level. And to sum up this entrepreneurial introduction, James, along with his partners, are the owners of 7 Blaze Pizza franchises in South Florida and 14 in Chicago. In addition, LeBron is a paid endorser and investor for that company. Hey, Trent, what'd you like best about that story?
Yeah, hey Vincent, I love that LeBron James has been so proactive and he's utilized his learnings and his skills as an athlete to establish influence in his life, in others' lives, his family, and how he's touching education. I'm a partner in a company called Transitions. Athletes and entrepreneurs have major transitions to make along in their careers and after their careers, and they're really, really big ones. Transitioning, that's an athletic skill, and it's to the business and the work world. And whoa, that's pretty rough. I mean, many folks have challenges like bridging that gap, right? So when I think about LeBron James and the impact he's having on these kids and education, I think like, hey, this is a kid who didn't even go to college. He came straight from high school to the NBA, and he's used these skills of learning and adapting, and he's trusted. He's built people around him, a team, and he's surrounded himself with these high quality, high integrity people, and he's this lifelong learner. Right, he continues to be selective. He doesn't take any deal, and he doesn't take any teammate or any offer. Right, so he has one of the most valuable skills right now, what I think is in the market today, which is the ability to pivot learning extremely quickly, adapt to it, and then execute it.
You couldn't say it better. He doesn't just take anything. I believe it was Reebok who offered him $10 million and he had no money with his family, and then he didn't take the deal, and then Nike came around and gave him 90.
Right? Isn't it amazing?
It's amazing. Well, that voice you all just heard, that's the sound of today's guest. My guest on the show today is someone I met at PodFest 2020. I was looking for ways to improve my podcast show, so I had to head over there. In Orlando, this is where I met Trent for the last part of the event. We were seated together at this networking type event, and we started to talk. I immediately thought, after hearing his story, he'd be a great fit to inspire people on my podcast, as he is now making major moves with his entrepreneurial work. So it is my pleasure to now introduce Trent Clark. Trent, thanks for coming on my show.
Vincent, I'm thrilled to be here, and it's a great part to be a part of your podcast and serving, your entrepreneurial journey and your entrepreneurial community. So I'm very thankful.
Great, Trent. Please introduce yourself to our listeners and preview your story without giving just too much away of this big entrepreneurial journey away.
Yeah, so for most people that know me, they know me probably because I coached in Major League Baseball for 13 years and went to the World Series 3 times. And so I was a coach for the Detroit Tigers and the Cleveland Indians and the Los Angeles Angels, and had the fortuitous benefit of coaching at Michigan State, Nick Saban and Tom Izzo. And so it was a journey of coaching. But what a lot of people don't know about me is I've started 9 companies, right, along the way. And that started early for me, Vincent, right? Like as a kid who was literally 10 years old, just going to work delivering newspapers and being able to watch my father's entrepreneurial journey, and then now being able to teach others. It's been a pretty wild ride.
Yeah, well, I commend the way you're giving back, the way you're able to pivot, like you said, from professional sports to now 9 businesses. I can't wait to learn all about this journey, because something I do on each episode, Trent, is the Big Five. Each episode, my guest and I will go over these 5 questions to help you, the listeners, learn what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Great. So when did you realize that you weren't happy with what you were doing, or maybe you just needed some kind of change to truly start this entrepreneurial journey?
I think first of all, I learned it, at a pretty young age, right? This whole idea of being 10 years old and, I went to football practice, when I was about 12, and I had 3 of my friends deliver newspapers for me. And I got paid about $5 a day to do a pretty large route in newspapers. And I paid each one of my buddies $1. So I made $2 to go to football. And I thought, man, I am the smartest guy in the world, right? And I thought, like, well, this is awesome. And then, I watched my father live it. And he taught me while I was living it on a smaller scale. He had a big event where he'd help me deliver papers on Sunday, the big heavy comic days, right? And he'd help me pull around the car and give me, 10 to 15 papers at a time I could manage and run to the next block. And it was kind of a workout. We'd go to breakfast, and he had an event one day, and I was right about 12 and 13 maybe. And he was really, he's a very reserved accountant, right? He owns an accounting firm, and he's an instructor at a local junior college at that time. And he was a little bit giddy, out of sorts for him. It was palpable. And so I asked him, I said about this. He said, today my business makes enough money that I don't have to teach anymore. I could just do my business, but now I teach because I want to teach. I want to help others. I want a passion, and I have a passion for that. But he felt freedom, right? And you could just see it in his face. And I thought, man, where can I get some of that, right? Like that was just, it was big. And as a kid growing up on the USTA, tennis circuit, I was around a lot of wealthy kids, right? I was not a particularly wealthy kid, but I was around a lot as an athlete. And man, I started meeting their parents, and they were very well educated, a ton of real estate owners, a lot of business owners. They were entrepreneurs. And man, and then I read a book when I was about 18, right? Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, man. And I was like, now I'm like hooked on why people are formulating their ways they are. And that was huge for me. That was a huge part of my entrepreneurial journey as a kid. And then as an adult, I would say the big thing was, separated from me in professional baseball. What separated was, when I was with the Tigers, I was a part of the Major League Baseball strike in 1994. And so I lost my job, right? I started my first company, which was private personal training, and I learned a ton. And man, I went through some tough things there and moved to a different town, and it was pretty crazy. And then I signed on to coach at MSU and learned a bunch of stuff from Coach Izzo and Coach Saban. Then I transitioned over back to Major League Baseball with the Tribe and 2 World Series. Fast forward that to 97, I get fired again. Like and I'm like, they're not renewing my contract. So I launched my second business, which is, a business in sports and doing gyms for athletes and showing them how to write it off in their taxes, a little entrepreneurial venture. And meanwhile, I'm doing that. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right, by Kiyosaki. And I'm like, man, I'm a terrible employee, right? And I lose that business. I sign on with the Angels. I bought the franchise 1-800 Got Junk, trying to go back to learn business because I don't have an MBA. I have a degree in education.
Right.
And I become the 13th of now over 150 franchisees, and we're just learning business skills and all these things. And I'm watching these big companies. I'm like thinking, man, if I ran my small business like this, I'd be broke. I've got to be smarter. I've got to be wiser. And I learned pretty fast that I wasn't a great employee, right? I really wanted to change and adapt things fast. And not every big company wants that, right? They don't want innovation. They don't want things have worked. And they don't need people challenging status quo at every minute, right?
Yeah, well, you seem to just take it upon yourself. Keep going.
Yeah,
Great.
so I mean, I realized, watching in professional baseball, like, and here I am. I've got this company on the side where it's not a huge company. I mean, I think we're probably generating about $600,000 to $800,000 in revenue a year, but I'm also a W-2 employee for this team, and I'm also surrounded by multimillionaires who are W-2 employees, right? They are paying out of the nose in taxes, right? Because they make 6, 8, $12 million a year, and they're coming to me going, "Hey, man, you live pretty well for a guy who doesn't make $6 million," right? And I started to understand, like, hey, like, I shape my business based on a lot of tax decisions and strategies and things that I have to do to make things work for my employees, and how I navigate that. And so it was a huge learning lesson in how things work. So man, it was balancing that. I probably likely would have been in that realm for years and doing both those things okay, or pretty good, right? But in entrepreneurship, like, pretty good's not enough. Like, you gotta be really excellent. You gotta be the top of your game. And so the thing that probably really pushed my entrepreneurial endeavors to the next level was being fired for the third time when the Angels didn't renew my contract like 1 year. And I'm like, wow. And my wife at that time, we had 3 boys, and we were a growing family with 5 now, and 5 kids. And man, I just realized, like, hey, listen, I've been interested in this entrepreneur thing, but now I got to get committed. And hey, are you interested? Are you committed? And when you get committed, man, big things happen, right?
I find the same way for a long time. I know, especially at my age, I'm still having to put food on my table. So it's going back and forth with what I can do. But then once my book came out officially, maybe a year before that, I said, it's time to fully commit myself. If I had to be broke for a little bit, year, 2 years, to whatever, at least I'm all in now, because you could be good at a few things, like you said, but if you want to be great, you need commitment.
Without a doubt.
So now that you've transitioned to this full entrepreneurial journey, you were in the baseball realm for so long, the coaching, doing these things. What are one or two of the most difficult parts for you to be an entrepreneur each day?
Yeah, I would say, it's really, entrepreneurship is all about the people, right? Like, that's first and foremost. I mean, you've got to get really good at working with people, and if you don't have that skill, I recommend everybody develop it right now. Surround themselves with people that know how to do it. It's a team game, and if you don't understand teams, I don't like your chances of making it well, right? It's a tough deal, and if you don't, as an individual, like I learned from my first business, which was me private training and maybe hiring a couple other people, but I could charge, $200 an hour as this athlete, guy who trained a bunch of the top athletes in the world. But I couldn't, have Danny or Beth. They couldn't charge that kind of money, right? So it became quickly that you've got to have teams to scale. So you got to get really good at that. The other thing I would say is that, entrepreneurship is not easy, and I think the current media is doing it an injustice, that everyone is like, hey, be an entrepreneur. Here's an LLC and a website. You'll make millions and be sitting on the beach. Like, come on, man. Like, that's so not true. Like, and it's funny, I speak all over the world to the top 2%, right? Entrepreneurs and founders, and they're mentoring some of the best people, which I know you have a huge passion for. And it, it I raise your hand if you work 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week. I can tell you the majority is closer to 50 than 30, right? Like, they are
Oh, yeah.
on it. It's a 24/7 deal. There's a lot to do, and time management is probably the most critical skill. I mean, being focused and intentional in all your work is so critical. And here's the thing that's probably the biggest thing for me, Vincent, about it, is that most entrepreneurs have a purpose to really change lives, and they do. right? Like, for me, I tell entrepreneurs, like, you employ 200 people, you're caring for 800, because the average family is 4 people. And so you're making decisions for 800. Hey, our 800 people, I'm letting 20 people go. That means 80 people don't have car payments. They don't have food on the table. These are breadwinners in their families, right? And so it's critical when we talk about that. If your purpose is to touch lives and change lives, what are you doing with your time to really maximize that purpose? And it's actually, if they're bad at it, it's actually reducing the very impact of their purpose and what they want to do.
You couldn't have said it better. With time management as a business owner trying to make all of these things happen, what do you choose first? And when you put it that way, where you have that many lives in your hands, those decisions are even more crucial with
Without
how
a
you're
doubt.
spending each day. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. As an entrepreneur, people do think it's this glamorous lifestyle at times and that there isn't, all these difficult decisions to make, but the world is right there and you have to attack it very, very cautiously.
Yeah. And like, what you just talked about there, like leadership now, whether you own it or not, like leadership, that's a 24/7 gig now, right? Like you're on all the time. And even it's becoming, hey, am I still, can I turn it off behind the doors of my own house? Well, I don't know. Are you on social media? Are you saying something that, like, it's a 24/7 gig now? Like, you're going to present yourself, your brand, your image in all things. And it's for someone who says, like, hey, I want to be in leadership. Hey, man, careful what you wish for, right? Like, are you sure? I got to ask him, like, this is not for the faint at heart. It is a tough gig. And sure, there is major sacrifices to be made, and there's major benefits to be had too. But easy, is not easy.
You're always what I'm saying, as a leader, you always have to be careful what you're doing. Everybody's watching, and a lot of times in normal positions, once that 9 to 5 is over, then you're signing off, right? You're
Right.
signing off. For us,
Yeah.
we're on at all times, whether we're thinking about the other things we have to do or we're having the people emulate us based on our decisions because we're in that leadership role. There is a ton to do.
For sure. For sure.
Always. But Trent, now we're looking back on our history and our story. What would you say one of your greatest failures or lessons learned is? And what did it teach you? Why is it still stuck with you all the way till today?
Man, tough to pick out one, right, Vincent? Like, I've had some really big failures, man, but if I had to go back to the real lessons of probably the majority of the failures, I got to tell you that my arrogance and my ego has probably been the downfall of most of my failures, as in work, in my marriage, as a father, in leading. Self-reliance and pride has probably struck me down more times. And you'd think a wise man would be like, whoa, you know what? I got to get a hold of this thing. I got to be a humble guy. Yet it is a slippery slope of when confidence turns to arrogance. And, I had this as an athlete, growing up. I think I can, man, I was the little engine that could all that. But when does that become a problem, when it turns to I can do anything and I'm the greatest? Right? Because I've had some success and I think I can. And we have these blind spots around that where it can cross over very easily. And one of the things we do in Leadershipity, and we teach in that company, as we teach the iddies of leadership, right? Spirituality, diversity, integrity, accountability, responsibility, adaptability, and dependability. Uh, we have a saying that, we judge ourselves on our intentions and others on their actions, right? That's a famous quote, because it's so easy as a leader. Like, we intend to do the right thing. Like, no one's out there going, hey, I really want to muck this up today, right? Or as mom, like, you know what I could do? I could really just yell at 3 of my kids today and really muck this up. Like, no one's intending to do that. But, our actions, we slowly drift into poor action sometimes. And so for me, humility is such a key. From my world, try telling someone that just made $1 million or more that they erred. How they're not ready to listen to how it could have been 2.5 or $10 million. And I'm guilty of this, right? Like, I had this happen in my life where I made some money and thought, as I looked back with my age, going, hey, if I could have done that again, I could have turned that $1.8 million transaction into $8.2 million if I'd followed the playbook, right? But, I didn't know the playbook and I wasn't being guided and advised. And, athletes or entrepreneurs, they're in the same in this, right? They have this level of success that sometimes puts ceilings on our openness and learning, because it's like, well, hey, Vincent, I can't learn from you now because I've had a lot of success getting to where I'm at. And I don't want to change anything. Like, this is working. I'm making $2 million a year. And you're like, well, wait a minute, Trent, can I help you make $5 million a year? And you're like, well, but it might go away. I don't know if I want to listen, right? So it's this lesson is, to me, the lesson I learned from it, is really, you've got to have someone catch your drift. You got to have somebody around you that we don't go running away from humility and doing the right things, right? We need someone around us, a good friend where I trust you, Vincent. You go, Trent, this isn't like you. You're kind of out of bounds here. Like, when I hear you say things like this, that's not really who you are about and your purpose. Why are you acting? I'm like, oh, no, you're right, Vincent. That's not me. And you're catching me before I get way off. When nobody catches people, we just slowly drift, right? And then all of a
Right,
sudden,
right.
we wake up 3 years later going, we are way off the line, right? We're way off the line of the direction we were heading, and things are not going well. And someone wakes up and goes, wait a minute, wow, my wife doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm divorced. I'm in a mess with a bad relationship with a bad person who's not treating things, or maybe not as a bad person, but a good person making bad choices, right? And we're making these bad choices, and I've ruined relationships, and how did I get here, right? Like, hey, it didn't happen yesterday, right? Like, this is a culmination of activities. And so when I think about the lesson of humility, that person, those people that you have around you, so it's to be very cautious on where you get information and who you surround yourself with people who you can know and trust, like experts with experience. Be very cautious of the imposters, the opinionated people that offer advice on things they don't really know. Like, and you talk about this in your book about how things changed for you because you had mentors all of a sudden that guided you through a very difficult and challenging time, and they're sprinkled through your life that just like, whoa. And they were there to provide an expertise. Like, who knows about severe brain damage? And like, hey, there's these experts in the world, and there's like, there's not thousands of them, right? There's like, you can count them on your hands, right? And you're like going, I got to talk to them, because who do I get that? So when we don't want just any information, we want the pointed and the most impactful information. And if I was to sit there and think about like where I made those poor things, I I may leaders make good and bad decisions based on the information they get. And if you don't ask the right questions, I may be making what I think is a good decision, but I only have 40% of the information. And so you don't ask your family physician about how you're going to go back and rehabilitate your brain injury, right? Because he's not the guy. Very, very highly astute, respected, well-educated person, sure. But that's not the person. You're looking for the person who's absolutely one of the best in the world is this, and has success and is executed. And you're going to gather information to get as close to 100% and make the best decisions you can. Do we ever get 100%? No, we don't. But I think if I had to look back on all that, it's something I got out of you and your book and meeting you, Vincent, and reading a little bit through your book and some things that have happened with you. And I'd love to get your input on this. Is there's two pains, right? The pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You choose. Like,
Yeah.
you choose. Like, what am I going to do today? Because the pain of discipline is it's very acute, right? It doesn't last long. Like, all of us, you ran cross country. You were a runner. Like, the pain of running, like, that doesn't wake everybody up in the morning and go, hey, let's go 12 miles as hard as we can. And by the way, a couple of us may vomit, right? This is not going to be great, right? Like, but you've never looked back at that time and go, I didn't get better. I was doing something to improve myself. That was never a chronic pain for you, right? That was an acute pain that hurt. The next day, hey, you recovered, you're a little sore, you go back at it. The choices that you made where you didn't get the information, the choices where you said, like, man, I'd like to go back and have that moment again. I would have done something different, right? Like, I'm 50 years old, and I can pull out 3 instances in my life that I've regretted since the day it happened, and some of them are over 35 years old, right? It's chronic pain, and if that pain's high enough, right? Like some of us are going to sit on bar stools and we're going to medicate that pain away, right? And it's like, hey, you've got to choose, and you get that choice. There's two pains, discipline or regret. You choose.
Yeah, I
Tell me
mean,
your opinion. Tell me your view on that.
you couldn't be more right. I mean, I always think that regret is way worse than just giving it a try. You know, for me, my main sport was baseball, right? So what can I do to prepare myself best for the baseball season? I'm going to start running. Running is going to help my body. It's going to help my mind. It's going to put me in a position to hopefully succeed a little more on the baseball field. And like you said, with just taking the due diligence to get the correct information and putting the right people around you, the dividends is off the charts.
Right?
You getting the information you need skyrockets you to where you want to be. There was a point after my accident, I guess, I mean, where I started getting into my real estate and having that flexibility with an entrepreneur, where I'm doing my speaking, but not really, you know, where I caught myself eventually, like you described. I caught myself on this road where I was going, and put some right people around me, got the correct information to get myself back on track. And I haven't looked back since.
Mm, that's so good. And I mean, think about how that served you, right? Like, I come back to your high school. You were a very good baseball player. Your coach named you the most consistent hitter on your team, right? Like, when I saw that in your book, like these are achievements that you made in your life, and like you look back at the work that you put into there. You do you have a single regret over the hard work? Like, it wasn't easy. Like, no, who wants to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and run, 6 miles before school? Like, who's doing that by choice? Like, hey, I want to lay in bed and sleep till 5 minutes till I got to go to hit the bus, right?
I
And
want to watch Mike and Mike in the morning. I don't have the time.
yeah, yeah. And even me, like, I know, like, health and wellness, right? I know it, but I will sit there after a long week on the road, and man, I want room service and bonbons and a good movie, right? Like, I'm not so interested in, like, hey, I need to go because this is 10:30 p.m. is the only time I can get down and get 45 hard minutes in the gym. Given the choice of least resistance, some of us are going to make that choice, and we do it, and we got to forgive ourselves. We got to move on. But that discipline, man, to me, it separates. And I'll tell you, and I spend my whole life right around the top 3%. And it's probably the big separator. The big separator is discipline. The challenge is the folks who have a discipline in one condition, like athletics, and then transferring all those skills of that discipline into another endeavor, into their next thing, like you, into podcasting, into this, into that. Like, how do you transfer those skills? The discipline stays, right? Like, that is the part that will stay with you forever.
Definitely, discipline can be a core, and like you're saying, it seems to be the theme of our show here is the time management with all of these things, and picking, like you go back to who you're surrounding yourself with, how you're spending your time, the regrets. I don't want to have them, so I'm willing to put in that time. But since you touched on surrounding yourself with the right people, if you could choose to have a conversation, learn from any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who would that right person be for you?
Mm. Yeah, that was a tough one for me to think about, right? Like that.
Well, the ideas are endless. The
I
idea,
know, and it's so wide open, right? So one of the guys I picked out really quick was a guy named Stephen K. Scott. He's an author and an entrepreneur. He wrote an influential book for me called The Richest Man That Ever Lived. And the whole story is talking about his endeavors of entrepreneurship intertwined with Solomon, right? The man of the Bible, right? And who wrote the book of Proverbs, which is long known as, like, listen, you want wisdom? This is where you start, right? Like the book of Proverbs, right? And Solomon is given, the story goes, he's blessed by the Lord as the wisest, and he's given the wealthiest value. Like in Solomon's days, like people equate like he would be a trillionaire in today's night. He's only touched by Bezos, maybe, right? Like there's only so many people who have that kind of money. But it's a as he describes his life, Stephen K. Scott, he surrounds himself with a group of ordinary people who are humbled enough to lean on each other, create value together, and together they like accomplish these extraordinary things in this entrepreneurship. And listen, setbacks, failures, like all of them, right? Like, but they had integrity. They had like a group of people that shared value together, right? And they believed in one another, and they held each other up when things were bad. And they also guided each other, when things were bad and when things were good. A bunch of other like-minded individuals to catch my drift. And living and leading right, to me, they're all written in a book 2,000 years ago, right? Like, I mean, we can reposition leadership. I do leadership development, and I could probably go to the hey and Isaiah this, like leadership and stories, and it was there a long time ago. There's been a lot of wisdom, and Proverbs. What a great place to start, right? But I think today I just simply reposition the content and stories that are relevant and impactful today, that I've lived, that I've seen. But these aren't new stories. There aren't new concepts necessarily. I always get a kick out of the fact that when people tell me, hey, there's no manual in parenting, I'm like, well, of course there was, man. Pick it up, man. It was written 2,000 years ago. So much wisdom there. Like, it's all there. Like, we gotta pick it up, and we gotta take our that skill, right? We gotta take our skill of learning and adapting it to today's environment, and then executing on the thing. And the thing I always like to see about great education and wisdom is most of it is really simple. It's just not easy, right? Like it's really simple. Like, oh, just do these 3 things and you're going to be a success. I've been trying, and it turns out those 3 things are really, really hard. Like, yeah, that's right. Like, it's really simple. It's not easy.
I'm really glad I have you on the show, because you're touching on a lot of things that I'm so passionate about and that I believe in. Like, the people around you are so important. It may be simple. The things may be right in front of you. You're saying 2,000 years. These things are right in front of us. Just take a deep breath and maybe reposition those thoughts.
For sure. Especially right now, right? In the current environment, in the current state of affairs. Like, it's an uneasy time right now, right? In the world. And it's time for people to gather together, to learn quickly, to adapt, and go back to the foundational basics, right? And those don't ever change. Those don't ever change. And right, they're really simple. And hey, treat others as you want to be treated, right? Love your neighbor. Like, do
And
these.
I love that line. I always say you learn these things in kindergarten, right? And people just tend to forget them as we grow and we grow, but they're very simple, and they've been in front of us the whole time.
They're not easy. They're not easy, right?
Oh, you just believe in the basics, building a solid core is where you got you where you are today, doing all these great things. But let's look a bit into the future now. Where do you see yourself in your entrepreneurial endeavors in the future? We'll do 1 year and 5 years here, Trent. 1
Yeah.
year from today, what are we seeing from you?
Well, I've got 3 brands, right? So I've got 3 brands in Leadershipity. We train up leaders and develop them. And so serving more entrepreneurs with a deeply dedicated team to creating these winning environments and improving our playbook, right, on how you best do that. We're always looking to get better. And, the other brand is Leadersport, right, where we do a lot of events and once in a lifetime things around, typically famous athletes and former athletes who have a message for folks, and it's learning in an environment with these people have been through some real challenging and real environments of success, and it's all around sport, which I love and you love, and can't get enough of. And then of course Transitions, which is the business of I partner in that with a group of people that are just exceptional at helping people transition, right? All these things are happening, and so that's really my 5-year. My 5-year is really the helping all these athletes and entrepreneurs transitioning each and every day, and the risk takers of this world, that have already made some of this biggest impact, but I free them up to really live their mission and purpose, and stay at that, very focused.
I love the philanthropic views. You remind me a lot of myself, where it's bigger than just us. The goal in life is how many lives you touch, I feel. That's kind of one of my facets of success, is not how well I'm doing, but how much I can really help others accomplish their dreams, their goals, their ambitions. But I love how we're so like-minded, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us, Trent. So thank you so much for coming on today. I know our listeners are going to see all the value in your episode today. I loved how you started as an entrepreneur as a kid with the newspapers, and then how you found a way, no pun intended, but transitioning yourself from steps in your life and constantly finding success by sticking to your core, sticking to your beliefs. But Trent, it's time for the last word. Is there something you want to share with our audience today that we did not get to touch on yet?
Well, I think we've touched on it a bit, but I would say, if you're going to play a big game, and you should, right? Because the big games, the big goals, that's what drives us, right? It gives us passion. And, the thing I would tell you is surround yourself in the game with the best cards, right? If you and I are going to play a card game and I'm holding all aces and you've got, a 7 and 8, a jack here and there, one ace, a king around you, I'm going to win, right? Like I've got it. So what are the cards? Well, the cards are an acronym, right? The people I want around me, I need them to have coachability, adaptability, responsibility, and then ultimately dependability.
Right.
And if I got folks around me like that, I was recently talking with, having a conversation with Brian Morgan, a writer I work with, and he told me his favorite baseball player was a person I coached, a guy named David Eckstein, right? A
I
Florida
remember
guy,
David
right?
Eckstein.
Yeah, David,
Yeah.
man. He's a player who absolutely maximized his physical abilities, right? But
Right.
he was very focused and intentional, and he was a straight card. The guy was an ace, right? But he wasn't just an ace physically. He was an ace emotionally. He was an ace mentally, right? He had the right mentality to get to benefit on all the key attributes that would require of him to be successful at that level, because he was giving away a lot physically to the players around him for sure. And as you talked about in the beginning, LeBron's an ace, right? Like the guy is unbelievably physically talented, but yet he continues to develop his emotional sense of well-being, his mentality, and he has all these things, yet he remains coachable. He continues to adapt. He takes responsibility for what happened. And everyone knows, like, hey, he's the most dependable guy on the floor, right? Like, and now he's becoming this dependable guy in the business. He's going to create value. And, and I think there are other great athletes like Peyton Manning, right? They're exceptional. Sidney Crosby, from maybe back in the day, my day, like Roger Staubach, Oral Hershiser. These people have had success in every environment because they had that discipline, and they were just any card. They were aces, right? So you get enough of those folks around you, man, like watch out, like, because you have an unbeatable hand. You can take on any game, and you want to shape that game to your ability. And that's one of the values of an entrepreneurship, like shape the game to your strengths. Get the cards around you where you can always win, right? So my last takeaway, along the same lines of your experience, your mission, and you're saying, I read this in your book, tell me I can't and I will. And you wrote that actually to me. It was a great little note.
Oh, I signed your book. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was, I just really resonated with me. I was a kid, and I put something out there that I wanted to be in the major leagues, man. That's what I wanted to do. And, of course I was told immediately, as a 14, 15-year-old kid, like, you're not fast enough. You're not big enough. You're not strong enough. All I heard was you're not enough for many years. And one mentor, a passion that you have, one mentor changed that when he said to me, after a great camp, and he was a former major leaguer, he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, sir, I want to do what you did. And he said, you can do that. And he believed in me, and I said, man, I just cannot. Everyone's telling me no. Everyone is saying this. And he said, let me ask you, those people, did they play in the major leagues? Did they have that experience? Because I did, and I'm telling you, you have what it takes. And if my message to any person today is like, you have what it takes. Vincent, you have what it takes. Look what you've overcome. You're an absolute world beater. And if there's a moment that goes by that you don't believe that, you wake up every day and look in the mirror and tell yourself, listen, I have what it takes. And you've overcome so much that it's absolutely inspirational, right? People are calling you all over the world to talk to you about Left for Dead and your story, because you have what it takes, and they want it, man. They need it, and they need to hear it again and again.
Yeah.
So I love your message, man.
Thank you, Trent. Because people are their own worst enemies sometimes, and sometimes it's a mentor that helps push them over the edge. Sometimes it's coming from the most unthoughtful. You don't think it would come from the place where you can get that emotional boost, that positivity that you need. It can come from the most unlikely places, but that's part of what my podcast is here for, to help people get inspired, know they can do it. And I know they can learn a lot of that from you too, Trent. So you might as well share your social media, your website, ways for our listeners to stay motivated by you.
Yeah, thanks. I am at Leadershipity, www.leadershipity.com. And I am on Twitter at Trent M. Clark and Leadershipity. And I'm on Instagram at Leadershipity. And hashtag Leadershipity, right? And then And then, you can find me on Facebook too at Trent M. Clark. Probably I'm most prevalent in the LinkedIn community because of, mostly business contacts and working with top level executives. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Trent M. Clark, and I'm pretty easy to find because there's not too many names, right, of Trent Clark. So I'm not too tough to find. I'd just like to thank Vincent Lanci for having me on. This has been great, Vincent, and I'm so inspired by your story. I'm thankful and blessed to have this opportunity, even to get to know you better, and down in Florida first, and then come along on your podcast and your show. So I am just overwhelmed with humility to get this chance. So I want to thank you, and listen, may God bless you always.
Thanks for coming on, Trent, and I can't wait to see what our future holds together. Well, everybody listening on, be sure to check out all those social media websites for great value and great content, and be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at Your Favorite Morning Podcast, and we're on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to grab a copy of my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now, but I want you to DM me or email me. I want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening and rate What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering stories for you on each episode. And as always, I will end the show with a quote that inspired me and know it will for you too. And this one comes from LeBron James, the star basketball forward on the Los Angeles Lakers. He simply put, nothing is given, everything is earned. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode of What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur.